Magnus Carlsen was on excellent form in the first 2 days of the World Rapid Play Championships held in Kazakhstan, and I'd like to take you through one of his games for my latest What Happens Next puzzle. So in this game he's playing Kajgaliev, who's a decent player, but Carlsen really makes short work of him. Carlsen has the black pieces. Let me go right from the beginning. So e4 and e5, and the opening is a very standard Giuoco piano. Okay, white would like to play pawn to d4, of course, but knight f6 thwarts that plan, and white is playing in the traditional Giuoco piano way, very quietly indeed. But just because it's a quiet start, it doesn't mean that things don't explode later. Of course, there have been no piece exchanges, which means there's a lot of tension in the position. Now, this variation with h3 is quite popular at the moment, and it can be quite dangerous. Sometimes white would like to play a very early bishop g5 to exploit this pin. The fact that black's bishop is now outside the pawn chain and can't come back to the e7 square to break that pin is perhaps the justification of this bishop g5 idea. And well, recently white has been doing quite well with this. It's an interesting idea. And note that white's king hasn't castled, and sometimes on a good day it even manages to castle queenside, which can of course help with the kingside attack. But Carlsen was ready for all this and played an interesting idea, knight e7. And the idea, of course, is that after bishop g5, the knight will come to g6, and then we can drive away the bishop very easily. Of course, the bishop can't come back to h4, or not. That's not a very good idea because the knight covers that square. So, instead of playing bishop g5, white simply castled here. And knight g6, and of course, this makes a lot of sense to bring the knight to g6, where you can perhaps try and get in on the outpost f4. So it's quite an aggressive way for Carlsen to play. And white plays knight d2, now c6. Okay, a useful move, covering d5 and perhaps allowing the bishop to come back here. I mean, you can see that the positions are almost symmetrical actually. So d4, and the bishop drops back to b6. So yeah, after c6 it means that after knight c4 the bishop can always retreat to c7 and everything is under control. But of course, with the pawn on d4 and e4 against the pawns on d6 and e5, you could say that white has a very slight advantage. But there's a great deal of tension in this position. White wouldn't want to capture too early because, well, that would just give black freedom. The bishop would be very nice on b6 and positions about equal. On the other hand, black doesn't want to capture here unless there's some tactical justification, because that would give white a strong centre. So you can see this is where the tension lies in the position. So rook e1, that's obviously useful to protect this pawn and perhaps to envisage this knight manoeuvre to either g3 or e3. So there's pressure building up on this pawn, and that's why the bishop comes back to protect e4, and that will allow the knight to switch round. h6 and knight f1, and now Carlsen tries to take the initiative. Knight h5, coming in on this key outpost on f4, and this is a very attractive square now that white has played the pawn to h3, because it means it's going to be less easy to play the pawn to g3 to drive that knight away. Oh, incidentally, it's not possible for white to play. Well, it is possible, but probably not very good to play knight takes e5. This is an important variation, of course. It's very often the case that there are tactical problems with a move like knight h5, because then pawn takes knight, queen takes knight, but now black takes on d4, and in this kind of position, actually, black is doing, well, it's very comfortable. Black has claimed some nice squares in the middle of the board, and maybe the queen comes to b6 or maybe f6. And this knight is also looking pretty good here, looking at these squares. So I mean, basically black is very comfortable here. The bishop can come to e6 as well. Okay, let's go back. So white played knight to e3, knight f4, and now knight f5. White is also playing the knight to this outpost. And queen f6, so that's a nice aggressive square for the queen, and perhaps preventing any exchanges on the d-file. And now white played g3, obviously a critical move if the knight, well, I won't give any more away actually, because this is the position that I'd like you to consider, to analyse, and yeah, here I'm going to give you two choices. Black can either play knight takes h3 check, obviously critical, or the other option I'm giving you is knight to d5, also very, very complicated. So which would you choose and why? Either knight takes h3 check or knight d5. Your choice. After I finish speaking, on the screen you'll see two options. You can click on the move that you'd like to play, and that'll bring you through to the next clip where I'll analyse each option and explain what's going on in the position. Good luck.